Hey class, welcome to the middle of week 4 here in the Family and Addictions course. We are moving right along. Next week is our last week in the course, and this week we're focusing on the treatment approaches for addicted families. And so I really just wanted to give some basic outline information. I know that I've provided a good deal of reading this and some videos this week for you to kind of really delve into the specific approaches. And of course our textbook has a very specific approach for treating the family, so you're reading about that, discussing it on the discussion boards. But I want to just kind of talk a little bit about some of the basic outlines of family systems approaches for working with addicted families. Certainly a big part of what we're talking about today or this class really is the family systems approach. Systems theories, and for those of you that have taken the family counseling class, you were exposed to this quite a bit. Systems theories basically says that instead of treating or approaching counseling with an individual, we're looking at a family as a system, so that system is our identified patient, so to speak. There is sort of a nebulous, or an organism that has its own life and it has its own way of reacting to things, the family system. So instead of looking at one person, we're looking at the interactions amongst many people in a system and how they operate, and how one behavior changes another behavior, and how one behavior relates to another behavior and increases positive and negative reactions to that. So that is the basic tenet of family systems approach. They see the family as an organism with a focus on those relationships between the members. Now, another big piece of that is that in family systems approaches, the big theory is that you really cannot, there is usually an identified patient. So for us in this class, it would be the addict or alcoholic who was coming to treatment, but we're treating the family. But we can't really understand that addict or alcoholic's behavior, their addiction, the things that they're doing, and how they're reacting to the process of treatment without understanding what's going on in the family, understanding those patterns and those interactions in the family. So that's why we want to bring them in and get them to be a part of that. Addicted family members really can, act out family problems. You'll see that these will be lifelong problems that have happened in the family, and that addiction from the addict or alcoholic is really just a byproduct of that. Or it can turn into an addiction because of the family problems. So there's a lot of different ways that can go and happen. One thing that we know for sure is that when the identified addict or alcoholic is a parent, and we're looking at a system full with children, we know that their addiction is going to negatively impact those children significantly. Some of those things that happen are discouraging change. Growth usually is stunted, not physical growth, but emotional growth. The way that love is conveyed in that family usually is very conditional. When it's an addicted system, there's a lot of emotional withdrawal, rigid boundaries, much of the same things that you see in the family systems approaches. And a distorted sense of responsibility, which is why you see that these roles start to develop in addicted systems. We're going to see through our family presentations that will be posted by Sunday that there's one group that will be focusing on these family roles, and that is that there's this idea that particularly the children start to take on sort of personas and roles in the family to be able to maintain the balance in the family, the homeostasis as it's referred to in family systems approach. So we usually in those roles we have the chemically dependent person, we have somebody that's the chief enabler, and that's usually the spouse, whether it's the husband or the wife of the chemically dependent person, and we'll talk about what enabling is in just a minute. The family hero, that's the person that usually tries to bring respectability to the family, and we'll hear more about that from the family group on Sunday when they post their group. The scapegoat, which usually takes the brunt of the anger and the shame for the family, and the lost child, who sort of exactly what it sounds like, moves away and goes out of the system, thinking that by doing that it will take pressure off the system. And then the mascot, the person, that's the comedian, that's the one that's trying to bring humor to the system and relieve the tension. So we know for sure that people play these family roles, and we know that we see that happening time and time again. Now, I did post an article on our Blackboard site that is contradicting that and saying that those roles have been overstated and that they may not play out the way we think we did. So that's sort of a counterpoint for you to take a look at. But there's really two main components to characteristics of addicted families that our family groups will be covering. One group will be covering enabling behaviors, and enabling behaviors is when you knowingly behave in a way that will take away the consequences from the addicted person. We've talked about enabling throughout the whole class. This is a big behavior in addicted families. Of course, an example of that, and a very common example of that in addicted families, would be that the addicted person gets in trouble with the law, gets into legal trouble. They'll say they get arrested, and an enabling behavior would be to have the family member go and bail them out and then bring them home. The reason that's enabling is that it really takes away the consequence. It gets the person out of the situation back home, and sort of smooths things over. The theory behind working with the addicts in these family systems is helping the families understand that the more that they take away the consequences, obviously the less impact that it will have on the addict, and it will keep them out there using longer. So we want to make sure that the addict feels those bumps in the road, so to speak, as hard as possible, because those are the types of things that in their own therapy, the addicted person, hopefully in their treatment, what they're getting is their counselors helping them connect those consequences with using instead of the euphoric recalls. Another piece is this idea of codependency, which is an unhealthy pattern of relating to the others in the family, so that you're getting too closely involved, and that you start to put your own feelings away for the other person, and start to really your life becomes their life, and it's kind of controversial. There's also a counterpoint article in our Blackboard site for you to read about codependency. A lot of people think that the concept of codependency is really biased against women, because most women are labeled codependent versus men, and that we don't have a lot of empirical evidence showing that is a real construct. But it is very highly used in the treatment world, so it's something that we need to be aware of. One other thing, two things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the family systems therapy in diverse populations, and how that works, and what the strengths and weaknesses are, and I also want to talk about some ethical issues in family therapy. Around the diverse populations piece, there's it's tricky, because family systems says we have to see the family as a whole system, and look at the patterns and interactions, and we sort of analyze those. Now that could be tricky for cultural purposes, because depending on the cultural differences in the definitions of families and the way that the roles of family members and the way they play out, that's not always the same across the board for different cultures. So family systems often sort of looks at those systems very generally, and so we got to be very careful about that, because different cultures have different ideas about what family is, and also the emphasis of what roles are played by whom are also different in different cultures. So when we're applying that family systems piece to that, we want to take into account the cultural differences in that, and the dynamics of the family must be understood before putting together any strategies there. And there's some good models to look at. There's the integrative cross-cultural model, which is a great family systems approach, but it also takes into consideration the cultural piece there, so that's something to look at. Now, from ethical issues, there's some strengths and limitations, and some ethical issues related to family therapy that we need to talk about. One is the strengths, is that empirically we see that family systems approaches are as effective in making behavior change as is individual therapy, so we know that it has some empirical evidence behind it. It does address the systematic factors in those systems that create and maintain substance use, and so that's a nice thing to be able to look at. And it looks that the symptoms of that substance use are a product of dysfunctional systems, in that you can reduce the substance abuse by correcting the faulty relationship patterns, and so there's a piece to that. Now, that takes the disease model and all those other models that we talked about, it sort of takes that out of the focus. So you really want to make sure that the addict and alcoholic understands that it is an ongoing disease, but that that disease impacts relationships, and that relationships can exacerbate the substance use. So. And the good thing about family systems approaches is that because it's a system-wide responsibility, it does not blame the addict or the alcoholic for the problem. It blames the system, and it requires everybody to get on board with the solutions. So some of the limitations is that it's really complex when obviously when you're dealing with one person as an individual therapy versus a system in family therapy. It really gets complex because you're looking at all those integrated patterns with people. So. And it does not, sometimes it can take the focus off of the substance abuse. If you're focusing on patterns, relationships, communication patterns, homeostasis, boundaries, and all of those other things that go along with family systems, sometimes the substance abuse problem, which is always and should be the primary presenting problem that's being addressed, gets pushed to the side in lieu of dealing with these other things. So you have to make sure that you keep that into perspective too, and that individual perspectives can get lost. And that's one of the limitations in family systems, is that when you're looking at these big wide patterns, is that people's individual personality styles sometimes get lost in that. Ethical issues. It takes a lot of training to be a family therapist, not probably more than just the one class that we offer. Even in our program, it's a great place to get started and to look at it. And of course, we're talking about it in this class as well. But it's good to go to workshops, conferences, go through those types of certifications. There's a marriage and family therapy license that someone could possibly look into as an add-on, as a specialty area that would provide more of that training and giving you a chance to be able to really delve into that kind of process versus just the individual approach. So training is a big piece of that. It is a complex way of doing therapy, and so someone shouldn't just go into it right out of a master's program, I don't think. Ethical issues of confidentiality definitely is a big one. When you're working in a family system, that's more people that could break confidentiality outside of those sessions, and so you really have to struggle to get everybody on board with keeping the therapy in the therapy room and making sure that everybody feels safe and secure in that room to be able to say the things that they need to be able to say. So that's just some general stuff about family systems therapy and how it relates specifically with addiction. We are, like I said, in the middle of our 4th week, so we only have about a week and a half to go in our class. It's gone by quickly. I'm sure you're working very diligently on your family group projects, and those of course are due this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. You're working in groups, so what I'd like for you to do is just for one person to submit that in, to choose one person in your group to submit it, because I just don't want everyone in the group submitting it. Everyone's going to get the same grade basically. So in your group, so have one person submit the project from your group, and you're going to submit it in 2 places. You're going to submit it into the assignment Dropbox, and there's also a place in the discussion board site where you're going to put it there so that everyone can view your family project. Now, why that's important is because next week, at the end of next week, you'll be taking your comprehensive final exam, and there are questions on that final exam that will be specifically about those presentations. So everyone should be viewing and clicking on and opening up those family presentations and looking at them and getting familiar with the concepts that are in those. So I think we're good right now, and so stay focused on the discussion boards, and stay focused on your family group project, and I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.